Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, welcome to the end of month Q&A video for October 2022. And we were actually a video down in October. I think it was the 20th. I missed a release date that I would typically have a video for. Sorry about that. I don't know if I was the only one that noticed or any of you picked up on it. My day job has been frantically busy all through the month and I just didn't have a video on that day when it rolled around. It's going to be even worse in November. I am trying to not miss any release videos. I'll tell you all about that at the end of this video, but fingers crossed we should have a solid month of videos coming up. But for now, you've been very busy with your questions this month, so let's see who's first up. Kevin. Hey Joe, just wanted to say that I enjoy your Q&A shows as much as your other shows. Thank you, Kevin. It makes me chuckle when I think that you and other YouTubers are basically talking to yourself when you make these shows. It's a really weird thing. I'm sat on my own in a room trying to seem conversational and sort of engaging. So it's a tricky skill. It takes a lot to actually kind of learn how to present videos. If you watch any of my videos from sort of 5 years ago, I was absolutely useless. So hopefully things have gotten a little better since then. So I think it's quite an achievement that you make them feel like you're actually talking to the viewer. Well done. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the further adventures of your Rickenbacker 330. I enjoyed its tones on the previous show so much that I've started to look at them seriously. However, I've heard they have a narrow neck width that can be an issue when moving from other brands. Is this the case, and was it a problem for you? It does have quite a sort of narrow neck on it. And to be honest, it's one of the things that put me off exploring Rickenbackers for quite a few years because I've got really big hands and I thought a narrow neck with these is just going to be a recipe for just smudging chords everywhere. It's actually not a problem at all. Now, a lot of people do find it's a bit tricky, especially if you're going from one brand of guitar to a Rickenbacker and vice versa. But for me, it's really actually quite easy to play and I don't find myself kind of mashing chords too much. So I think the only thing you can do is get your hands on a Rickenbacker and try it out and see if it's a problem for you. So it might take a little bit of getting used to, but hopping from a Fender to a Gibson to a Rickenbacker and back again, it's not so much of an issue for me. It's actually quite easy. So I'm glad I didn't let that put me off actually going down the Rickenbacker route and trying to get one for myself. Thomas3120. The preamp tube pedal is more for non-tube amps, or are they also good to use with a tube/valve amps? So tube pedals serve a multitude of purposes, really. And yes, they can be very, very useful with solid state amps, or if you're using impulse responses and digital modeling and things to give you a bit of a kind of real tube amp feel under the fingers when you're using the solid state or digital modeling. But they can sound fantastic into the front end of tube amps as well. They can very often, not all, but very often act as kind of preamps in their own right, so that you can plug them into the effects loop return of your amp, bypass the whole preamp section and kind of give yourself a different amplifier. But they can sound great as overdrives and boosts just into the front end, and that's how I like to use them, because yes, if you're pushing the amp with extra level to get the amp breaking up, a solid state pedal, a tube pedal, it's all kind of clean level up to a point. But if you're using the tube pedal to actually create some overdrive, as you typically would with a sort of overdrive-y, preampy type pedal, then yes, you're going to get the feel of the tube compression and the kind of asymmetrical breakup and all the good stuff that we get when we push tubes nice and hard from the pedal to then have it be made louder by the amplifier. So you can use them in a variety of different ways, but tube pedal into the front end of a tube amp can sound absolutely godly with the right pedal. So it all depends how you want to use it. But yeah, you can use them in many different ways, but they're not just for solid state amps. Johnny M. Your Strat has some serious mojo going on. I'm not usually a straight up Strat fan, but yours always sounds so awesome. Diving through those amps, it was insane. As I was watching that part, I was thinking, I bet he can feel the sound pressure waves pummeling his back, and sure enough, you mentioned it at the end. Great stuff, cheers. So this was the video where I ran the two flagship Dr. Z's, the Z-Rec and the Z-Master, together, and as Johnny said, at the end of the video, I just dimed both of the amps. So two 30-watt amps screaming loud in this small room. It was destructive, to say the least. But this guitar here, the Strat that you're referring to, it really is a special guitar. And I did make a video about this guitar a year or two ago, because it's one that people keep asking about. And it's just a very special instrument. It's a parts caster. It's an American Strat body. I think it's a Japanese strat neck. It's got some really nice electronics in it, but I love the massive headstock on it. And it used to be white, this guitar, believe it or not. It's now the shade of Homer Simpson, but it's just a very special guitar. And I am thinking about making a video shortly about my guitars, either every guitar I own, because it's something people ask about all the time, or my 5 maybe most special guitars, of which this will definitely be one. So please do let me know in the comments if you have any preferences as to which video I should make out of those two. I've kind of held off making it because people have asked me to show them all my guitars and things for quite a few years now. And I've always held off doing it because this channel is pretty much about the gear and celebrating the gear. It's not about my gear specifically. And I've always felt a bit uncomfortable about going, hey, here's some guitars that I spent money on. But it's something you guys ask about a lot. So let me know whether you'd like to see every guitar I own or my 5 most special guitars. And I will tailor that video to the most popular comments. Desmond Richards. With that sound, one could be the gurning champion of the world. Everything working as it should. Loud and proud. Don't know how you stayed on the seat, lol. Great sounds, love it. Cheers. So yeah, as I said, that video cranking the 2 Dr. Z's as loud as they would go, it was punishing, but God, did they sound good together. Dr. Z makes some astonishing amplifiers, and the Z-Rec and the Z-Master are 2 of their absolute best. So having them running together with their kind of similar but also opposing tonal qualities, just slotting together at ridiculous volume, it was an experience, to say the least. And on that note, Mike Zate himself, aka Dr. Z, brilliant. I can add more than thank you so much, Joe. So it was great to hear that Dr. Z himself was on board with that video and enjoyed the tones as much as the rest of you. So thank you, Mike, for dropping by and commenting. It's always good to see you in the comment sections on the videos, and I'm glad you approved of me running both of your amps very, very loud. Scott Brockway. Honestly, I don't care for the Mastery Bridge. It sounds thin and lacks mids. I just go with the pickup swap. So I've now released all of the videos that I did modifying my Rickenbacker. So I released the final video first in its kind of final form with the toaster pickups, the Mastery Bridge, the vintage spec electronics, the high pass capacitor on the switch, all of that. And then I kind of released the mod videos in sequential order. So that's now been completed. So you've seen the whole journey I went on with that guitar. And this is referring to swapping out the stock Rickenbacker bridge for the Mastery Bridge. And this comment kind of encapsulates the overall tone of the comment section, which is, for the price, it probably wasn't worth doing. And in hindsight, I would probably agree. Now, I do much prefer the Mastery Bridge in terms of how it feels to play, because it's much more rounded and less angular, so it's very comfortable. It's just a better thought out product. It bolts to the base plate so the bridge doesn't fly off every time you change the strings. It's a great bridge, but for the, I think, 200 odd pounds it cost me, tonally especially, it had subtle EQ differences, but overall, I wouldn't be sad if I'd kept the original bridge, especially when it's covered over by the vanity plate, so you don't even look at the saddles. It was an interesting experiment. I'm kind of glad I did it on the one hand, just to debunk myths, if nothing else, but also, out of all the mods I did, it was one of the most expensive and the one that made the least difference to the tone. So yeah, I think most people in the comments agreed with Scott, but I take the hits on these things, so you don't have to. Enrico Palazzo. I have a request for you, Joe. Could you please do a video of the Rick with the Nashville tuning? I would love to hear it. It's an interesting idea for a video, Enrico, and I might just do that because I've never played a guitar in Nashville tuning, let alone experimented on recordings or anything. So the Rickenbacker would seem a logical choice to do that with. So if there's any other interest for that video, drop it in the comments, and if enough of you want to see it, I will buy some strings and experiment with Nashville tuning. But it always sounds amazing layered in recordings, especially with a guitar in standard, to give you that 12-string type effect. Can sound incredible. So I'd like to experiment at some point. So maybe you've given me the dangling carrot that I need, Enrico, to do that. Freddie Cook Jr. Steel of the century. No smoke, no fuse blown. Works, looks great, and should be fine. Sounds ace, mate. She's a keeper. So this is the really weird kit build that I bought on eBay, and it's a clone of the old Marshall 2061 lead and bass 20. Cost me just over £100, which, if you compare that to other amps you could buy new and second hand for £100, you won't get anything, let alone a hand-wired premium quality tube amp. And it sounds utterly unbelievable, doesn't it? So for £100, you can get some absolute steals on eBay if you buy up other people's kit builds. Chiefline. Man, that amp is killer. What a great find. Takes some courage to buy a clone amp without hearing it first, but it paid off big time. Yeah, you can buy some duds, and it all depends on the build quality and the quality of the components used and all that sort of stuff. Because as I've said in a few videos with clone amps, most of them are built expertly well by people who know those circuits inside and out, and they've wired loads of amps before, and they're brilliant. But you might get someone like me who buys a kit and does a really half-assed job and then sells it on. So you do have to kind of weigh up the risk and reward, but for £100 to get an amp that is just that incredible, it is worth the risk sometimes, I think. John Lucas. Don't know what you're doing in post, but that is easily the best sounding amp you've ever demoed. Really compliments your style, riffing Joe. Well, thank you, John. And yeah, it does sound incredible. So to hear that a £100 amp I bought on eBay is as good as two Dr. Z's running together, for example, it does sound like a pretty good deal, doesn't it? In terms of what I'm doing in post, I have made videos before about how I kind of mix the audio for these videos, but in short, I don't do anything in post. I record the speaker cabinet with 3 close mics, a ribbon, a dynamic, and a condenser. So I kind of got low end, mid-range, and treble. And then I have a room mic as well that I blend in to taste depending on what the video seems to want. So I take those 3 mics forward the room, balance them out so that to me, coming out of these monitors, it sounds as close as it did to me in the room coming out of the speaker cabinet, and then I upload it to YouTube. There's no EQ, there's no compression, there's no enhancement, there's no weird trickery whatsoever. You're hearing raw audio recordings from 4 microphones balanced out to sound as close as it did to me here in the room. And that's it. So yes, there's no trickery happening in post. That is as good as that amp sounds. It is wonderful. Dirt Bull. Okay, I think you have a great speaker cabinet that is contributing heavily to the wonderful sound you are getting. This is a very important point as well, because yes, that amplifier is brilliant, but of course, if you're buying a combo and it comes with a speaker, that's one thing, but buying a head, you do then have to pair it with a speaker cabinet and speakers. So I'm running it into a Zilla Studio Pro 2x12 with 2 amazing quality Alnico speakers in there. And yes, most amps will sound pretty good into those speakers. But to me, having that wonderful speaker cabinet with those great speakers, it seems to let the amps that I put into it sound as they sound. It just lets everything through. So yes, the speaker cabinet makes a difference. Having a really good one gives the amp the best chance of sounding great as you can give it, but also you need the amp to put into it. A speaker cabinet is nothing on its own. So the amp is astonishing, and I gave it the best chance of sounding astonishing by putting it into that speaker cabinet. But it's an important point to note. What cabinet you put a amplifier into with what speakers will fairly dramatically to sort of change how it sounds. So yes, you're right to point that out. Dirt Bull. Cosmic Wizard. Got one, Joe. Thanks for letting us know this exists. So this is something I've had a lot of comments about, and I'm using this as an excuse to bring it up in the Q&A. The Decibelics Reverend, the Bixonic X Pandora pedal. It's now out. I think the initial very big batch sold out in about 30 minutes. There's a huge amount of demand for this pedal. And yeah, it's not a circuit I'd ever really explored before, the X Pandora. I'd heard of it, I'd heard demos of some of the old kind of round ones, but I'd never really paid much attention to it. But then I got hold of this, and I'm starting, loosely, to think about what my 2023 pedal board is going to be. I've decided I am going to do one, and it will be out on New Year's Day, as is kind of tradition around here. And this is going straight on there. I don't know where, I don't know at what position on the board, on the loop switcher, but this will be on there somewhere. It really is an outstanding pedal. So it's great to hear you've got one. Definitely check out the Decibelics website, and the batches are kind of released and they sell out very quickly. So keep an eye out. There might be a mailing list you can get onto, I'm not sure, to find out when the batches are coming out. But if you like the tones in that video, jump on this pedal because it is absolutely ridiculous. Laszlo Bota, I think. Hopefully I pronounced your name right. Are these speakers broken in? The Ruby sounds like not. So this is the old Celestion Alnico comparison I did between the blue, the ruby, the gold, and the cream. Yes, all speakers in that video were broken in, The Ruby sounds very different to the others because that's how it's designed. The other Alnicos, the blue and the gold especially, have that really kind of chimey top end that we know and love, pairs beautifully with Vox amps and things like that. The cream is a higher powered one that sounds great when it's pushed really hard or with a sort of Marshally type amp. I always loved it with that. The Ruby is very rolled off and thick in the lower mid-range, which won't be to everybody's tastes, in all honesty. It's not really to mine. But if you're using, say, a Vox amp for that thick, creamy Brian May type thing, it's perfect. But it does sound very different to the other three Celestion Alnico speakers. So yes, all broken in, but it just is voiced very, very differently. This guy. I always get nervously apprehensive when you perch a Perky pedal on your knee and proceed to gesticulate wildly with your hands. I couldn't bear to see any one of these sweet beasts take a swan dive and hit the floor. Going forward, could you secure them to one of your belt loops with a bungee cord, or ensconce them closer into your lap? So I've never dropped one yet. I know I tend to kind of hold the pedal up in the intro of a video and show it and then sort of put it on my lap and do the rest of the intro. I haven't dropped one yet, so don't worry. Nothing really gets damaged when I'm shooting videos at all. And even if it did fall off my lap, it's only about that far down to the floor, so it's not going to go too far. And most pedals are built like tanks nowadays. You're not going to damage them by sort of having them drop about that far. But, you know, fingers crossed, we'll carry on not dropping pedals. Jake the Snake. Toasters all day. And this was another video, this was the final video in the Rickenbacker mod series, and again this one comment kind of summed up all of the other comments that came in under that video. The high gain pickups that come stock with most Rickenbackers, they're just very differently voiced. They are fairly kind of rolled off up top compared to the Toasters, and they sound a bit kind of muffled and congested in the sort of lower mid-range and the low frequencies. The Toasters are much clearer, they're much thinner, and they have that kind of scoopy mid-range that I associate with the classic 60s Rickenbacker tone. But as I said in the outro of that video, and a few people mentioned in the comments, high gain pickups have been used in Rickenbackers since the late 60s, so they are kind of vintage correct, and just as many guitarists who have become synonymous with Rickenbackers over the years have used the high gain pickups as well as the Toasters. So it's not like the Toasters are the be all and end all, high gains are rubbish. It's not the case at all. High gains can be great for the right player, but for me, for the Tom Petty, Mike Campbell thing, the Toaster pickups are where it's at. Those pickups really made my guitar sound like what I classify as a classic Rickenbacker. Peeve. Bloody brilliant video. I have a 2020 360 and thought it was the true Rickenbacker sound until I watched your video. Playing Mr. Tambourine Man would have been a great test. Thanks, Perky. Well, as much as I love Mr. Tambourine Man, and you do, and it would be the perfect song to play with that guitar, sadly the YouTube copyright police don't really like you playing copyrighted riffs, so I can't really sort of play Beatles songs in the Rickenbacker video as appropriate as it would be. As I just said, the high gain pickups, they are the true Rickenbacker sound up to a point. The Toasters and the high gains are just different eras of classic Rickenbacker. So if you're going after the old Beatles Mike Campbell thing, yes, the Toasters are probably the pickups you would want in your 360 to do that with. But if you're playing Jam songs or Smith songs or whatever, you kind of want the high gains for that, and the Toasters wouldn't be appropriate. So it entirely depends what era of Rickenbacker you're going after as to which pickup set is the right one for you. But for Mr. Tambourine Man, yeah, you'll probably get closer to that with the Toasters. But if you like how your Rickenbacker sounds, leave it alone. Don't go buying some Toasters just because I made a video and they sounded bright and nice compared to the high gains. If you like your high gains, stick with them. Gianfranco Semproni. Joe, which one did you prefer, the 20 or the 50 watts? So this is the Highlight Custom 50 and the Highlight Custom SD, the 20 watt shiny diamond one. So these are two Highlight amps that I demoed, wow, when was it? Start of this year, I think. One right at the start of the year and one in kind of May time. And I demoed the 20 watt EL84 kind of version of the 504 circuit and the VR 504, which is a DR 504 kind of clone, really, at the 50 watt. The shiny diamond, the 20 watt EL84 one, it was a really nice amp, don't get me wrong, I really liked it, but it didn't sound quite like a classic high watt amp to my ears, that kind of tone, the Gilmour thing and the Pete Townsend thing. It did sound brilliant, but it wasn't quite that sound. The 50 watt amp, especially into the Highlight cabinets with the Fane speakers, It was one of the finest amps I've ever played. They're pricey amplifiers. I honestly wish I could have afforded to buy it off Andre, but sadly I couldn't. But it's a wonderful amplifier, and if you like the highlight sound and the high watt sound, the VR504, that's where I would go. It's an astonishingly good amplifier. It really, really hurt to give that one back. Funky Bass UK. The Monty sounded better in the Heritage, but the Throwback sounded clearer in the Les Paul. Very interesting video. I have a few sets of Montys in my guitars and basses, and they sound so clear and pleasing. Yes, Montys make outstanding pickups across the board. I've tried loads of Matt's pickups, and they're all brilliant. And I think this comment kind of shows something that I've thought about PAF pickups in particular for a long time. Now, this is true for all pickups up to a point, I think, but it seems to be especially relevant to PAFs, which is there is no best PAF, first and foremost, because all the originals sounded different, so it depends which original a winder has cloned as to how their pickup's going to end up sounding. So all clones sound different because all originals sounded different. But also, PAFs seem to be very guitar specific in my experience. So in that video, I love the Montys so much. I love the Throwback so much, but they did suit different guitars because different pieces of wood resonate differently, especially as they are unpotted pickups. They tend to be a bit microphonic and pick up some of the acoustic resonance of the wood, and different PAFs do suit different guitars. And I kind of agree with your summation that the Monty sounded better in the Heritage and the Throwback sounded better in the Les Paul, because that's where I left them. And I have no inclination to take those pickups out of either of those guitars. The Montys really, to me, I really prefer them in thin lines. I've tried them in a few thin lines over the years, and the Monty's PAFs just work in thin line guitars. Those Throwbacks, they're astonishingly good pickups, and in my Les Paul, for that kind of burst type thing, even though it's not a burst, they just work brilliantly well. So yeah, PAFs seem very dependent on which particular guitar you put them in, and one Les Paul standard that rolls off the production line will sound different with those PAFs in to the next guitar that rolls off the production line after it. So it's all experimenting at the end of the day, and it's always fun to experiment. And finally this month, I tend to leave either a brutal comment till the end or a really nice comment, and this is a really nice comment. James Westervelt. I dig your playing. Many demos are insufferable, but yours isn't. Well, thank you, James, and it's always nice to hear when people actually like what I play as much as the gear I'm demoing, because I'm not a lead guitarist, and a lot of demo people love playing lead guitar, and that's great. You do need to hear how a pedal, for example, sounds with lead guitar. I'm much more of a rhythm player, and I always get the impression that a lot of people who watch these videos are rhythm players as well, and playing simple rock rhythm riffs will let you hear how a piece of gear sounds just as much as the person shredding with it, and in many ways it's often more relevant to the people who actually watch the videos. So it's great to hear that you're actually into my playing, James, and that I do hopefully a decent job of getting across what a piece of gear sounds like with it. So there we go, the end of this month's Q&A. Now, as I said in the intro, November's going to be a really weird month for me because I'm basically away from home for the whole month working with my day job. So I'm not going to be around too much to make videos. So what I've done last week and this week coming up before I go away, I'm just nailing as many videos as I can so that I can schedule them, and hopefully we don't miss any videos throughout November, even though I'm not going to be here. So yeah, I'm away traveling, doing lots of various things for about 3 weeks. And then the last week, I'm actually taking my first holiday this year, I think. I'm going to Amsterdam for a few days, which should be really nice. So yeah, I'm just going to be away for most of November, but hopefully, fingers crossed, if I've worked it out right, we shouldn't miss any video releases. So I've been kind of stockpiling a few interesting videos. We've got a Fane speaker coming up, one of the ones that was in that sort of Ascension Range shootout a few months ago, but a standalone video of that going through lots of different amplifiers. I haven't demoed this yet, but this turned up yesterday. As I said, I'm thinking about my 2023 pedal board, and I'd like an analog reverb on it. And this thing is absolutely enormous, but it sounds beautiful. So I think this is going straight onto the 2023 pedal board, last in line as my new reverb. It's a lovely, lovely thing. And we also have a new pedal from Berry Pedals over in Australia, a really nice phaser. And also this, I don't know if anyone's actually seen this yet or if it's been announced. It's a new Jim Hageman pedal. This is the Thermionic Reinforcer, which I think is the best name for a tube pedal I've ever come across. And this is just a beast. The first side runs just one 12AX7. It's kind of similar to Jim's blue single channel tube overdrive he does. The second side engages the second tube, but I don't quite know how he's done it, but he's done some trickery with this, but kind of clips it symmetrically and quite hard. So it's almost like what people would do with diodes in sort of modded Marshalls back in the 80s, but he's managed to do it with a tube, and it's just a really hard-edged, gnarly distortion sound. So I'm looking forward to shooting this demo probably tomorrow morning. But yeah, some really cool stuff coming up, but hopefully I've worked it so we don't miss any releases. So there we are, folks. Thank you for all your questions throughout this month. Please do keep them coming in. I love making these Q&As, and the most interesting and relevant questions to the most people that come in throughout the month, I will feature in a video at the end of November. But for now, thank you for watching. I hope you have a good month, and I will see you all very, very soon. Bye-bye.